use the term adverse childhood experiences, we're talking about those kinds of burdens or hardships or threats or causes of stress that really put a strain on the lives of children, and often through the strains they put on their families. So the reason we care about that is because we have a growing science base that tells us that even when children are very young and aren't really aware of the specifics about what's going on, when they experience constant, significant high levels of stress, that can really have a negative impact on their long-term prospects for learning and development and actually physical and mental health. The brain actually, from birth, actually even beginning before birth, the brain creates its architecture, it builds its circuitry in a way that is very heavily influenced by experience. Particularly in the first couple of years, there are critical periods for the development of different parts of the circuitry, and during those critical periods when circuits are being made, they are most responsive to the environment. So when children grow up in a very stable, predictable, nurturing, enriching environment with a lot of good interaction, that builds strong circuits in the brain. And when children grow up experiencing significant adversity from poverty, exposure to violence, maltreatment, the burdens of racism and other forms of discrimination, the circuits at that time are vulnerable to the impacts of stress responses in the body that can have an effect that can weaken those circuits and therefore make you more vulnerable for problems later. It's a very important question about what we could do, because I think a lot of people look at significant adversity and see it as impossible to do anything about. And that's just not true. So what the science is telling us, actually science has really given us some really clear signals about three types of actions and things that we could do to promote healthy development of children. The first is to strengthen the relationships that children have with the important adults in their lives. It obviously starts with their parents and their families, but also includes other adults, extended family members, and child care providers and other people, neighbors, who play an important part of their upbringing, their lives. So strengthening the responsiveness of relationships is something we can do individually, and communities can help provide that support. Government programs, when necessary, could provide that support. It's not the first place you go. The second issue is to help build the skills of the adults who care for children, to provide the kind of role modeling and buffering against adversity and help children build their own skills to be able to cope with stress themselves. That's something we could be doing. What it means is that parents who are dealing with serious stress need more than just encouragement and advice and guidance. Some could benefit from skill building, particularly parents who themselves had very difficult childhoods and may not have built those skills. The skills of people who work in early education programs and child care centers. Some part of that staff are not paid very well and not as well trained, so that's kind of skill building is something that is very important we could do. And the final thing that all of us could do is to reduce the stresses on families that are preventable. So whether it be violence in the community, substance abuse, mental illness, the problems of poverty, the burdens of discrimination, the extent to which we could reduce those stresses on families would strengthen the ability of families to provide what their children need. So these kinds of strategies, principles, if you will, are things that all of us can do, whether it's at the level of society, neighbors, neighborhood level, or within families. There's a lot we could be doing that could improve the lives of many, many children who will have problems later in school and with their health that were completely preventable from the time they were born.